Hey everyone, welcome back to Lowlands Wargaming. Did you miss us? It's been a while. In case you didn't watch the channel update, we took a little bit of a break from videos. Sometimes life happens and it's hard to find the time to make a bunch of edits and a bunch of recordings. And in the meantime, we uploaded a bunch of podcasts. So if you haven't found those yet, search for Lowlands Wargaming on Spotify or Apple Music, and you'll be able to find at this point like 8, maybe 9 episodes of different topics that we've covered. But the hobby mojo struck us again, and now we're back with a vengeance to create some more delightful video content for you all. Today I want to take some time to do a little bit of a reflection over the past year and discuss the army list that I've been running for the past year and kind of reflect on what worked and what didn't. Take you with me on the thought process behind the armies, why they've been built in a certain way, and maybe we can learn something from there. Of course, most of these armies, they will not be the same, or they might not even be playable in the new edition that's coming up, but nonetheless, we can still learn from the general principles, because the game that we all know and love will, in large part of it, stay the same, and the same principles will apply. So yeah, we've got I think 6 or 7 different armies to cover today, and I won't go into extreme depth on each of them because again that doesn't make sense with the new edition coming up. I'll just touch upon the philosophies behind them and if they performed as well as I thought they would when I theory crafted the list to begin with. So first things first, we've got this beautiful fella over here, the Great Beast of Gorgoroth, together with the Emperor and Gwaihir, which is a list that I brought to the Grand Tournament last year in the Netherlands, so just over a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, because the Grand Tournament of this year is coming up just now. This was in a time before the Emperor nerf, and I was kind of bored of playing the Emperor Legion just the normal way, because I'd been doing that a lot, and I wanted to look for ways to make it more interesting and spice it up a little bit. And I allied in the Great Beast thinking, it's a very efficient unit, it does something that the Easterlings doesn't do, it's a green ally, I can use Broger to keep it safe. So yeah, why not? The idea behind the list was to make the Eastlings into more of a skirmishing force rather than a force that just runs up and punch people in the face, which is normally very good at, and instead be more careful and use the large banner effect from the Emperor to make the beast a little bit better, use Brogir's tremor ability to keep both the beast and the Emperor safe because they cannot go prone, and then you can just tremor into their combat and knock everything else prone and then they're fine. Things like that. It suffered a little bit on the model count, mostly because you now have to pay for Black Dragon upgrades, and the Emperor is kind of expensive, and the Beast is expensive-ish, and you just don't have that many points to throw around at 650. So I don't think this list would work anymore, because now the Emperor has been nerfed, is 30 points more expensive, and you really can't miss those 30 points in this list. It worked really well. It actually netted me a 3rd place in the GT. I only lost, the most important loss I took, I don't remember if I went 5-1, I think I did. But I lost to Evan Iverson, who went on to win the whole event in a Seize the Prize, where the main roll-off was who could choose the board edge. And the board edge kind of influenced most of the game because he chose a side where the other side had a massive terrain piece in the way between me and the objective, and I kind of had to move my force around it, which gave him the time he needed to dig it up and get a head start, and then he never relinquished it. That's the hallmark of a good player. If they're ahead, they can do everything they need to do to keep that lead, and unless dice really go weird, then they usually can coast that early lead into a win from there. So overall, very solid list. It worked the way I expected it to, but it was very different from your normal Easterling list. And if you would switch into this from having played a lot of Easterlings normally, you initially probably won't do very well, because it's very easy to get the Great Beast out of position and get it flash killed, and now you're very close to breaking, because those are 11 models of your total body count that are very easily slain once the beast is dead. Another thing that really worked well in this particular combination is because the Eastling force, of course, has access to the drum, and the beast itself moves at 8 inches. It's surprisingly mobile. You have a lot of control in just moving around the field and kind of baiting your opponent into a position where it's better for you to engage them. And you don't bait them in the normal sense where you have shooting superiority, although the beast is quite decent at shooting with the 9 bows on top, and you have a few throwing daggers from acolytes, but more like they don't know where you're going to strike from, and they have to be very careful that, of course, they don't get a beast trampling through their lines at a very wrong angle. So yeah, the combination between acolytes, high movement, shooting from the beast, it made it a very harassing type force, and then once there's an engagement, it's actually pretty good at fighting thanks to the high fight value from the Easterlings and the banner rerolls from the Emperor. So overall, very solid list. Kind of sad that it's no longer as easily possible after the Emperor nerf, but I suppose the Emperor nerf was deserved considering just how good he was. I just kind of wish they had nerfed the Legion instead of the Emperor himself, so you could do more of these wacky things in alliances and see it more. But then again, alliances are going away anyways with the new edition, so you know, what do we care? So then moving on to 2024, I want to start off with a honorable mention that it's an army list that I played like once throughout the year, but I'm very sad to see it go, and that's Eorl the Young and his sons, as well as a Knight of the White Tower, who have been announced that they're going into Legacy. Now, we have done a whole video on the Eorl the Young Alliance list, which I'm not going to go over again in detail here. I just wanted to give them a shout out. I'm very sad to see them go the way of Legacy. Hopefully it'll still be playable with, depending on how Legacy gets supported by Games Workshop, but at the time of recording we simply don't know the answer to that. So we're just going to have to wait and see to see if the Legacy stuff is still going to be playable. But yeah, Eorl the Young, very fun list. If you're not familiar with the list, the history behind it and how it plays, go check out the video that we already have on the channel from, I think, like a year or two ago now. It's still very valid. Okay, and then the first major event of 24 was actually the Eastlings again for me. We all felt like an Emperor nerf was coming, and this was just before the Erratas FAQs of February would be released. So I decided to take the Eastlings one last time in its traditional form of the Legion. At 700 points I had Gwaihir, a captain, the Emperor, and a whole bunch of Eastlings, including 9 acolytes and just a whole bunch of pikes and some axe swaps in there as well. Yeah, so I don't really have any new points to share on the Eastlings compared to that in-depth video that we did a while ago that you can also find on our channel. But there's like one remark I think that I would like to put in compared to that video, and I have really grown to love the Eastling captain on foot just with a shield and nothing else. It's so solid, so cheap for what it does, you know, the might, the marches, but mostly it adds some hitting power into your force that you normally don't have that much of, because he's strength 4, but with piercing strike to strength 5, then two-handing, he can really put in the work. And then with 2 pikes behind and a reroll, even if he's two-handing, he still has like 3 normal dice to try and fish for 6s. And of course his own 2 dice plus the reroll from the Legion means that you're actually throwing a whole bunch of dice to try and win a combat. And then you can more reliably kill things, especially those pesky defense 7 warriors or maybe defense 7 heroes. They really have to be careful of this guy. You can also tag team him with the Emperor. You know, the Emperor can struggle killing defense 7 things, but then if you have, you know, two-handing strength 5 captain next to him that wounds those defense 7 things on 4s, it suddenly becomes a lot easier. So definitely have grown to appreciate the humble Eastling captain more in the Legion, to the point where I wouldn't take Rutabi until I think 750 or higher, and below that I would just stick with a captain. And even on like low points, you could make the argument that instead of taking Gwaihir, you just take a captain so you can have more bodies. So like a 500 point list, instead of taking Emperor Gwaihir, you can just take Emperor Captain and just have more models that way. There's also an argument to be made for that. Personally, I really love Gwaihir, so I kind of always take him, but the captain is also just really, really solid. Then, moving into something that's a little bit more interesting, the Pass of the Druadan Legendary Legion. This was a bit of a passion project of mine at the start of the year. I really wanted to try out this Legion because it just looked so interesting to me in the books. You know, the bonuses with the markers that they can ignore difficult terrain, the bonus to winning heroic move roll-offs, that they win them on a 3+, kind of like they have an Elven Blade for heroic move roll-offs. It's just very interesting to me, and it's also something that you just don't see in tournaments. And I was like, well, that might mean it's bad, or it might mean that people just don't really have access to the models because the Woses and Ganburigan have been out of production for so long that it's actually really hard to find them. And you may notice that the whole army is actually alternative models. There's a Theoden from the print that goes ever on, the Royal Guard and Outrider are from the Valley, and the Woes miniatures are actually naked Celtic fanatics from I forget the brand. We'll edit it in somewhere. Sil will work his magic. But yeah, a really fun conversion. 3D printed some blowpipes to make them work. Really happy with how they turned out. And although the event that I took them with didn't go so well, I did end up winning Best Painted with them, which is very nice. But about the list. My reading of the list was that this is interesting, but I don't want to play it hero heavy, because if you want to play hero heavy Rohan, Riders of Theoden is just objectively a better choice. So that naturally means that it's going to be troop heavy, which is also supported by the fact that Gunbury Gun just has to take 15 Wozes, so you already have a bunch of fragile dudes running around, so you might as well double down on the troops. So for 500 points I decided just to go all out on Royal Guard or Throwing Spears, because the 5/5 on the charge, especially coupled with the bonus to winning hero move roll off, seemed very tantalizing. And then the Throwing Spears would allow me to skirmish a little bit, as well with the Wozes with their blowpipes with 12-inch range. And then there's just a single Outrider thrown in there, both for point reasons as well as just having a model that you can more easily park on objectives. And the idea was that Theoden and Gunbury Gun would just play it relatively safe and would let the troops do the work. And kind of skirmish, draw people into a bad position, hopefully draw them into one of those difficult terrain pieces where we have a marker put down, then kind of like hammer and anvil them with the Wozes. Into just defeating them through cavalry charges and repeated strikes from the Wozes after softening up with throwing weapons and blowpipes. Unfortunately, that didn't work so well. It worked in some situations, but there's a few factors that I found out why it didn't end up really panning out. And the main thing is there's only one bow in this list, and the rest is all really short-range weapons. So if an enemy recognized correctly that if they advanced into you, they would probably be torn to shreds, there was nothing to actually make them come into 12-inch range. So they could kind of freely position outside that 12-inch threat bubble from the Woes blowpipes. And in order to draw them forward, I would have to then play the dangerous game of actually advancing with the Royal Guard, pester them with throwing spears and get them to move in that way, which never really ended up panning out that way. And this is on top of the obvious weaknesses of ranged armies, where sometimes you just have a scenario where you need to go to the middle immediately, and you can't really leverage your range superiority as much as you would like to. Another flaw is that it kind of misses some hitting power. Like sure, the Royal Guard have strength 4 and a charge thanks to the... Oh no, that's the whole point. They don't have the army bonus from the Rohirrim. So they don't have strength 4 on the charge. They don't have access to up their strength like the normal riders would. And the Wozes are also stuck at strength 3. You can take Dernhelm in the list, who normally is quite decent at killing things, but she will then also be stuck at strength 3. So that's just kind of hurts the list, especially if you run into defense 6. And then finally, the final nail in the coffin is that you can't really rely on there being enough difficult terrain on tournaments for the bonuses to actually matter. And sometimes you'll just have tables where there's a few ruins scattered around, and they will be enough for breaking up, creating bottlenecks and breaking up line of sight, but they aren't actually difficult terrain, so you can't use your bonuses there. And sometimes there is difficult terrain, but it's in positions where it really has no impact on the pace of the game whatsoever. It's nowhere near where the objectives are, or there's not an area where the opponent will have to move through. So it's actually only a few cases where you can really make use of the bonuses of the Legendary Legion, which is a big shame, because it's very thematic. It's a iconic moment from the books, and it's relatively niche. You don't see it a lot on the tabletop. So while I did have great joy in creating the army and playing it, it wasn't very successful. So after that one event, I decided not to run it again at events, at least where I have the intention of competing for the top spots. And we do have a league running in the Netherlands, so I did try to kind of get good results in for most tournaments that I went to. Now, I have a faint glimmer of hope that this Legion might actually still be playable in the new edition, because the Wozes and Gunbury Gun somehow weren't on the Legacy list, despite everything else being on there. So it's very well possible that there is still a Paso de Druadan army list in the new edition, and maybe it'll be slightly improved, either because Rowan got better, or the Wozes got cheaper, or because they got better bonuses. Or maybe it's just the same as it is now, and it's fine. It's not perfect by any stretch, but it's also not horrible if you can pilot it well. And I'm definitely interested in trying it out again next year, maybe at some higher points level with a few more heroes sprinkled in, and see how that goes. Alright, next up we have the Minas Tirith and Gwaihir soup that I've been running at major events at high points levels this year. Most notably in Nations Cup, where the top players from different countries competed, and I also took it to the Grand Tournament of Belfast, or Nenef Aneudiat, which we also reviewed in our podcast. So if you're interested in like more in-depth details about that event, you can see that in our podcast. So what is the idea behind the list? Now, as you can see, it's a not very traditional take on Minas Tirith. Like, it's not unusual to see Gwaihir allied in, but it's a force that's over half of it is Founding Court Guard, and then there's 2 bolt throwers there. So it's not the usual composition where it's like a third of your force is rangers. They also have spears and they form your backline, and that's kind of like your range superiority. This list is like, nah, screw that. We have bolt throwers, we don't need rangers. All of the Fight 4, or Fight 5 in this case, with the banner from Boromir, is coming from the Founding Court Guard. And then we have some warriors of Minas Tirith with spears and shields to, fill out the body of the numbers. So there's a few synergistic elements to kind of combine this list, and it kind of started with my desire to run Gwaihir after painting him up. And then, I had seen him allied into Minas Tirith, so that was a natural point to start looking. It's also the good army that I have the most experience with running. And it also, Gwaihir can address some of the weaknesses of Minas Tirith. It's a very straightforward army. Like, what you see is what you get. It doesn't have many tricks, it doesn't have incredible hitting power. So your opponent can always kind of relatively safely execute their game plan, and there's not that much that you do as a Minas Tirith player to disrupt it. You just kind of endure it and hope you can still beat them. And Gwaihir kind of changes that. It's something that the opponent really has to take into account, something that you can really use to threaten their key pieces without exposing too much of yourself. But Gwaihir kind of has a few downsides, most notably his, incredibly ability to just whiff with only 2 attacks or 3 on the charge. That's the main pain point of Gwaihir. And the secondary is that he's a hero of legend. So if you would normally run like a force with Boromir or Madro or something, he then has to be your leader. And Gwaihir is a piece that you kind of want to be able to risk if you really need to, and YOLO in somewhere. And then sure, he can survive a turn or 2, maybe even 3. But there's quite a large risk that he'll whiff and maybe take a wound or 2, and then you're giving up leader VPs, which is not ideal. So there's a few things that we did to address that. The whiffing is compensated by Boromir. With the 6-inch banner, if you play it correctly and keep Gwaihir within 6 inches of Boromir, he'll not only have a reroll from the banner, but he also won't have to spend his own might to call moves. He'll be able to kind of like mooch off the 6 might points of Boromir, who then call moves for both the army and Gwaihir to use. So that Gwaihir can use the might to kind of bump up the might or the fight rolls if he needs to, as well as calling hero combats and pushing through wounds and that kind of stuff. And then the leader issue is kind of solved by just take Denethor. Take Denethor, give him some tomatoes, put him behind a building, go tell him to have a nap, and then just forget about Denethor for the rest of the game, because probably your opponent will forget about him as well, because he's hiding behind a building and they don't see him anymore. That kind of almost guarantees that you're not going to give away any leader VPs, which is so nice. Like, sometimes games are just decided through leader VPs, and even if they aren't, they could be the difference between major and minor wins. So that's already an edge that you're getting compared to your opponent. Now finally, about the troop choice, I already mentioned it a little bit, but the inclusion of the bolt throwers not only is just a pain in the ass for your opponent because the bolt throwers are just really strong, it also lets us really solidify our line by not having to include defense 4 rangers. And now the whole line is defense 7 on the approach, thanks to the shield wall from the Warriors of Minas Tirith and the Founding Court Guard having it natively. And we can kind of choose which troops we want at the front. If we're up against strength 4 or against terror, we want to have the Founding Court Guards in the front, thanks to their bodyguard and high defense. And if against other stuff, we can just put the Warriors of Minas Tirith in the front and the Founding Court Guard behind them, and then we can save our Founding Court Guard a little bit longer, and we just sacrifice the Warriors of Minas Tirith first. Having these really durable troops also means that we're hard to break. We're likely to break the opponent before we break, also thanks to the casualties they take from the bolt throwers going in. And the bolt throwers just kind of give us some extra might points, some extra battlefield control, and overall just a very good kind of combined arms force, where instead of taking a bunch of bows as part of the combined arms, it's just all compacted into the 2 bolt throwers. Now, I did really well with this list. Belfast didn't go so well because I had a few games in there that unfortunately just didn't go my way, either due to some bad luck or bad positioning or just, as circumstances, as things happen in this game. But Nations Cup actually went really well. I only lost a single game, and even that one, my opponent admitted that the rolls were kind of crazy. I had 1 draw against Assault of Lorien and 4 wins, and this is on like the highest level of competitive gaming against the best of what other countries have to offer. So I'm very happy with how the list performed overall. And I'm kind of sad to see that this kind of list building will also probably no longer be a thing in the new edition, because, well, they've mentioned that there's no alliance matrix anymore. It's just army lists, right? Kind of Legendary Legion style list building. So I'm worried that we can't really have this creative exploration of, you know, what's possible, what kind of alliances can we make. So yeah, shame to see it go, but happy with how it went. So recently, of course, a new supplement released, and in that supplement was the Battle for Fornost Legendary Legion, amongst other things. Now, I was very excited for this because that's a really cool moment in the history of Lord of the Rings as well. And the Eorl model is just cool, right? It's just really cool profile, cool rules. So I was really excited and I wanted to play it, and it was like a week after release. So I borrowed the elves from a mate of mine, I proxied Eorl, I used my Minas Tirith, and I made this list. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. It's probably good. Maybe it's good. I don't know. We'll see. I had my reservations, but playing the list, yeah, the philosophy behind it is really simple. You have Círdan with Blinding Light and, you know, all the buffs and stuff. You max out your elf bows and you give them spears, so you have some overwhelming shooting, and you have some warriors of Minas Tirith to kind of like flash out your shield wall for relatively cheap. And then you have Glorfindel and Eorl as like 2 hard-hitting pieces that can just kind of go and do their thing. And Glorfindel is then your leader because he's way more durable than Eorl, and, you know, Eorl has the thing where he has to charge. So on paper it looked pretty decent. Okay enough numbers, likes going up against magic and terror and that kind of stuff because of the bonuses that it has, and I felt decently comfortable with it. The event didn't go so well, mostly because I was sick. I still ended up going and playing because I had promised to bring a bunch of terrain for tables, and if I didn't go, then they would be 3 or 4 tables short, which would be bad because then a bunch of people can't play. But I really shouldn't have gone because I was quite sick at the time. I still had a good time at the tournament, ish, considering the circumstances, but the army was just kind of okay. I never felt powerless, so I always had a play, I always had a game plan, but surprisingly static army with not that much killing power at the end of the day, and Eorl was actually really annoying to use. Going into the tournament, I was like, it's fine, having to charge not that big of a deal. Dane has it, you know, Theodred has it, they can deal with it just fine. But the difference there is that they just have to charge, and Eorl specifically has to charge heroes, which can lead you to very awkward situations. Like, I had situations where I didn't mind having to charge, but I kind of wanted to charge like over here towards the objective, but there just so happened to be a enemy hero like 8 inches the other way. And then I couldn't even call a heroic move, because if I did, then he would have to go, you know, charge this guy, and then all of the troops kind of would have to go with him, or just not take a turn at all, or he wouldn't call with me, which kind of would defeat the point of, you know, calling the heroic move. And then there was also a situation where I just got like baited out and put into a wrong position, and there's not that much you can do about it once the lines have clashed. Like, you get a turn or two where you can just freely throw him into enemy warriors because you control his positioning, but once combat has joined, the lines are chaotic and things die and gaps appear and things like that, there's not that much you can do about it anymore. So yeah, if I would play the Fornost Legion again, I would build it very differently. Probably not go so all in on the elves with bows, but just use ranged of honor instead. They still have the 3+ shoot value. Sure, it's only strength 2 bows, but they're so much cheaper. And then you can kind of flesh out the bodies a little bit more, and maybe not even take Círdan, and just take a captain or 2, just for calling the moves and maybe like babysitting Eorl a little bit and just doing it that way. Or take Aranarf, who's also available in the Legion, and I've even seen lists pop up where people have Aranarf as their leader, so that both Eorl and Glorfindel can just YOLO in there, and Aranarf is sitting somewhere safe, just taking 2 shots a turn and not doing much else. Not sure if that's the play personally, because, you know, constant champion is also a thing, but also he's relatively squishy, you know, he can be shot as well, so that's definitely an interesting take. So I do think there's more ways of playing the Battle for Fornost. I just personally wasn't super impressed by it in the end. All right, and then last up for the armies of this year is what I took most recently to an event in the south of the Netherlands, and that's this alliance between the Serpent Horde and Mordor, featuring the Great Beast, Druadan, the Shadow Lord, and Gorbag. Now, of course, these are all very efficient heroes, known for their qualities, and the idea here is that I really enjoyed playing with the Great Beast in the previous Grand Tournament. I just wanted to have another go at making him, you know, just shine and play with it. So the idea here is that, you know, the banner from Sul'dan again is helping the Great Beast win combats if need be. The Shadow Lord helps protect the Great Beast a little bit with magic, and the Harbinger aura to make the terror a little bit more effective. And also the Shadow Lord can protect the Great Beast from shooting, because if the enemy has like an overwhelming amount of shooting, especially with now that the rules have been updated where infantry and cavalry no longer generate in the ways for the Great Beast, that's definitely a thing. So yeah, overall, kind of like the Gwaihir Minas Tirith alliance, this is another alliance where it's synergistic. You take elements from both to try and complement each other. We have a Black Numenorian front rank with Gorbag mixed in, and then a Haradan back rank where half of them have bows because of the army bonus from the Serpent Horde. So overall I had 22 bows, because I also had some trackers with me, 5 of which 2 were mounted on wargs for some more movement pieces. So yeah, that's been basically my year in review of the armies that I've been playing. A really enjoyable year. It's been fun trying out new concepts and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And I'm both looking forward to the new edition because that means we get to try out a whole bunch of new things again. But I'm also kind of hesitant about it because I'm kind of scared of what the list building is going to look like. And also a lot of the units that you see on this table are going to Legacy. The Citadel Guard on Horse probably going away because they mentioned that they won't support models like Wargear options that they don't sell models for. Earl and his sons and Knight of the White Tower are going. Rohan Outriders are going away. Trackers, mounted trackers on Warg, the Great Beast, the Shadow Lord. Yeah, a whole bunch of models are affected, and it just so happens that on this table the only army that I'll probably be able to play as is in the new edition is the Easterlings, because the Minas Tirith and Gwaihir alliance is unlikely to be a thing unless they make a very liberal Black Gate Legion thing where the Gwaihirs help the Men of the West, but even then you wouldn't have Boromir or Denethor in it, right? So it's not going to be the same. Now, I do have a faint hope that the Pass of Druadan is going to be playable, so maybe that will be playable, but I'm not entirely sure about it because it's such a niche army. It might have just get forgotten about in the new edition, but we'll see. I'm curious to hear about your thoughts of this. Was this helpful, this kind of content? What have your favorite armies been in the last year? What worked for you and what didn't? And what are things that you're looking forward to trying out in the new edition or seeing what has changed? I hope you enjoyed watching this. Thanks again for your support. I'm happy to be back. I hope you didn't miss us too badly, and see you in the next one at Lowlands Wargaming.